Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin with breaking news out of Alberta tonight, where the body of 14-year-old Samuel Bird has been found following a lengthy search. The Edmonton Police Service says one man has now been arrested and charged in connection with Bird's murder. In a media release, Edmonton Police Service said Bird's remains were located Thursday in a rural area outside of the city the day before. EPS charged 38-year-old Brian Farrell with second-degree murder and interfering with a body in relation to Bird's homicide, along with 13 other offenses, including arson. EPS say they are not looking for other suspects at this time. Family and supporters began searching for Bird after his disappearance on June 1st, saying it wasn't like him to run away. In September, EPS executed a search warrant at a friend's house where Bird was last seen. The home was destroyed by a suspicious fire later that month, says EPS. It is unknown if the fire was in relation to Bird's murder investigation. On social media, Bird's mother, Alana Joseph, thanked Edmonton police, searchers, Samuel's warriors, and the cherished friends she made along the way. She also thanked all of those who donated to the search efforts and those who showed up to rallies. To Saskatchewan now, where the Prince Albert Grand Council is hosting a two-day event in Saskatoon to share findings from an 18-month feasibility study on Indigenous policing. The study gathered community input on safety concerns and ways to improve security in their communities. Video journalist Rachel May spoke with the Grand Chief and Vice Chief.
How important it is, where we are at. I know at the national level, we wanted to make our Indigenous policing an essential service for our Indigenous community. And for that legislation to recognize First Nations jurisdiction over policing and community safety is so important. That should have been implemented a long time ago during the signing of the treaty.
Vice Chief Joseph Tassani of the Prince Albert Grand Council spoke to APTN about what goes into making Indigenous policing a reality. The PAGC represents 12 First Nations across 28 communities in northern Saskatchewan and received $1.4 million in 2024 from federal and provincial governments to conduct a 2-year feasibility study. This week, the council shared some highlights of the study with members of PAGC communities. Tassani says that the key difference between current policing and Indigenous policing is the direct involvement with the nations themselves.
That's what's different within this policing model. We're doing extensive community engagement meeting with the Chief and Council and the members, the elders, and the community.
Since receiving government funding, the engagement team has met with all 28 member communities, reaching nearly 9,000 people. Over 800 surveys completed. 55% of respondents said they don't feel safe in their community. The top 3 concerns were gang activity, drug trafficking, and substance abuse. PAGC Grand Chief Brian Hardlot says that through all the engagement, one theme stood out.
You know, that we're all the same, that we're all there for the same purpose, and that's really to make our communities safe.
The top concerns with the current policing model included slow response times, a lack of communication, and little community engagement. One of the PAGC's main concerns moving forward is securing funding to make Indigenous policing a reality. Hardlot says all parties, including those interested in joining the force, need to work together to move it forward.
It's just a matter of the support from the government and also the will to do it from the Chief and Councils and having those people in place to do the work.
The feasibility study is now in its 18th month of community consultation, with the final report expected by March 2026. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Mi'kmaq Member of Parliament Jaime Batiste is calling for a study that could lead to the amending of the Indian Act. The Liberal MP recently tabled a motion for a report that would look at the impacts of sections of the Indian Act that are often referred to as the second generation cutoff. It's our topic for this week's Truth and Politics panel. With us, as always, is Jennifer Leywitz, the CEO of Pasqua Strategies, and Niigaan Sinclair, columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Niigaan, great to see you. Jennifer, Jaime Batista is calling for a study on the impacts of what's commonly known as the second generation cutoff. Can you give us some background on what that is?
Oh, we know through the Indian Act that there were certain amendments that were made that basically the government dictates who belongs to nations across this country, especially through status cards. A lot of people know, they've heard the term 6-1, 6-2. That's essentially your kind of like indication on whether or not you're the generation of cutoff. So if ISC and the government of Canada determined that you are no longer eligible to pass along your treaty benefits to your children, that's where it ends. It's a little bit of a colonial tool. It's kind of taken that power and that autonomy away from nations to kind of decide who is a part of their membership and community and who should be able to access their treaty rights. And I think sometimes we kind of collude the difference between treaty rights and also benefits. And I think this is just more, of the government's control that has been there historically and continues to this day.
Niigaan, any sense of how many people have been affected by this in the last 40 years?
Well, one of them would be me, and there are many, many others. Approximately 225,000 people estimated have been impacted by the second generation cutoff. What Jen was speaking about, of course, was the edits that were made when there was an attempt to try to clarify and define Indigenous identity, and a sincere attempt in lots of circles to bring people back into the fold of getting their status, getting access to their treaty and Indigenous rights. And there was a creation of a kind of formula model which said that if you married a non-Indigenous person, even if they were a Métis person or a person without status, there would be a blood quantum that sort of dilute the blood, as it were. So 6-1s often are considered to be sort of full bloods, even though they may not have 100% Indigenous blood. And then 6-2s are considered often half, even though that percentage doesn't quite match that as well. It's basically, do you have one status parent? And so I'm in that boat, particularly because my parents chose not to, or my dad lost his status, and then there was a number of issues that then when we came back in the fold, I became a 6-2. So that means that those of us who are impacted, we have to make determinations of who do we marry, who do we make children with, will we be able to pass on our treaty and status rights? And then on top of that, communities have to then face the reality that it is the federal government that determines who belongs to what community. That's different than membership, but the federal government really has in its hands all of the tools to determine who is a part of a community, who gets rights from that community, and so on. It's really a colonial model.
Lots going on with this, Jennifer, and a complicated issue. What all could this study, or should this study that MP Batista is calling for, look at?
I think realistically, this should go back to as far back as the historical archives will allow us to go back on what Europe's understanding was of our governance structures. As somebody that has, proficiency in Indigenous governance, that has been an area that I have found some difficulty in finding, especially when it comes to the research. I think I'm going to just need to make the trip myself one day. But there's disconnect, especially when it comes to what, Europe, when Europe was doing the surveillance and they were heavily monitoring our tribes and our people in order to bring in very oppressive and heavy legislation. There seems to be a gap on the understanding of what their interpretations were of women in leadership, even the process in which they put down this harsh legislation onto our people and how they intertwined that membership piece into it. Because as Niigaan was talking about, there is a difference between the membership and ISC's differing opinion on who belongs to a nation. But I think the problem for us is that nations are getting ready to start, revitalizing their governance structures, but they're going to need a little bit more understanding on those membership codes. How far does that go? And if they're completely reliant on ISC for funding models, unfortunately, nations are going to get in the position where they're going to be making hard decisions on who actually accesses programs on a nation, because if all of the program funding doesn't allow it to stretch beyond who is registered as a band member there, it's going to get really tricky. And I would love to see more information come out about this. If the federal government has an opportunity to do any studies and to look further into this, there is so much more historical context and research we could be uncovering.
Right. Niigaan, how important is it for First Nations to have a say in this, and not just members of Parliament and the Senate?
receive the rights that our communities have fought for over a century and a half to maintain and to continue. The simple answer is to give our membership back to First Nations. It's in many ways already existing for instance, Métis people. Métis people can make determinations of who is and who is not a Métis person. They usually use elements of blood or ancestry, but there's lots of different ways that the Métis Federation here in Manitoba have made determinations on memberships as well. First Nations should be able to have that kind of sense of sovereignty and that ability to be able to determine their own membership. We have membership codes, but those aren't rights making mechanisms. The federal government doesn't recognize membership codes as being able to denote rights or give rights. And so that's a real problem. And what ultimately, I think the First Nations to be able to make decisions for themselves. The problem, of course, is the federal government doesn't want to acquiesce that control. They're fearful that we're going to somehow adopt everybody under the sun, and then the funding models, which are often per cap or per individual, will then suddenly balloon and make the federal government freak out. There's lots of ways that we can deal with this through being partners, through dealing with each other as human beings, and treating our nations truly as nations.
Jennifer Negon, we're going to leave it there. We're going to be talking about cows and plows and a special anniversary for the University of Manitoba over on the podcast. Thanks to you both.
You gotcha.
Years after the so-called SNC-Lavalin affair, a democracy watchdog is calling for the prosecution of Justin Trudeau. That story and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. It's been more than 6 years since Jody Wilson-Raybould resigned from Justin Trudeau's cabinet amidst the SNC-Lavalin affair. But a democracy advocacy organization continues its fight to have the former Prime Minister prosecuted for his role in that scandal. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story.
It was back in February 2019 at a parliamentary committee that Jody Wilson-Raybould famously spoke her truth on how Trudeau pressured her when she was Attorney General to withdraw criminal charges against mining company SNC-Lavalin. Fast forward to earlier this year, when Democracy Watch sent a letter to Ontario Attorney General Doug Downey, asking him to pave the way for a private prosecution of Trudeau for obstruction of justice and breach of trust in the SNC-Lavalin affair. But the Ontario Attorney General's office decided to stay the proceedings, stating the unlikelihood of conviction. Yet Democracy Watch's Duff Conacher says there is more than enough evidence to proceed, and has asked the Ontario Attorney General to reconsider in a new letter.
And there's lots of evidence that Justin Trudeau intentionally tried to get the Attorney General, pressured the Attorney General to stop the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. And that's all that's needed to prove obstruction of justice. So if you can't stop a prosecution based on an incorrect legal standard, saying we can't prove this.
The scandal led to Wilson-Raybould resigning from cabinet and eventually being ousted from the Liberal Party. Conacher admits the issue may have long since faded from the public mind, but that doesn't mean it should be forgotten.
It was deliberately made old news by the RCMP, and it is a cover-up, and they tried to bury it, keep it secret, and just through delay, hope that everyone would stop paying attention and they would be able to, for completely unjustifiable reasons, let Justin Trudeau walk. And we're not going to give up on it.
Wilson-Raybould won re-election as an independent in 2019, but left politics in 2021. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
As you may remember, earlier this week we told you about Tia Wood, a young Cree woman from Alberta who is breaking down doors in the music business in a big way. Tonight, APTN's Tina House had a chance to catch up with Wood to see what she's been up to.
Ever since Tia Wood was little, she knew she wanted to sing. Here she is at 6 years old, singing at a community talent show for the first time, and winning the top prize of $500.
I grew up singing. I probably could sing before I could talk. I grew up around a really musical family. My dad was a founder of Northern Cree. My mom was in an all-girls drum group. My sister is Fawn, my uncle Randy, so it was kind of inevitable.
And now, at the age of 26, Tia Wood is breaking down barriers in the music business. She's the first Indigenous woman to be signed by Sony Music, and last year was nominated for a Juno Award, where she also performed with a collaboration of other artists, including the Snotty Nose Rez Kids. She has come a long ways from her reservation of the Saddle Lake Cree Nation in Alberta, following her dreams to the bright lights of Los Angeles.
Like 2 days before I was supposed to head back to the res and catch my flight home, and I was like, man, I should just stay. I just felt something within myself telling me that I had something to see through there, and that was about 4.5 years ago, and so much has happened since then, and it's been such a beautiful ride.
Where do I start and how do I say it? My voice is so tired.
And just recently, Tia collaborated with rock star Shawn Mendes at a sold-out show in Vancouver. They sang his hit song Youth, and Tia had an opportunity to write her own verse about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls.
I had so many other ideas, but that was kind of just calling my name, you know, because whenever I get big opportunities to say something on a big platform, I like to bring up the issues because, you know, they're so important and they affect all of us, and it just felt right, and those words just flow, like they just poured out of me.
And for Tia, looking up at a sold-out crowd in Rogers Arena, it was a magical moment.
It was like, honestly, like just such a full circle moment, because when I was a little girl, I used to always dream of that. I used to always, we had this like stage that my parents built in the back of the house, and I used to pretend that I was performing the crowds when there was like just the horses or something. So it was like a full really full circle moment, and it was really cool to represent.
Tia Wood is dropping her latest single, Sage My Soul, this week, and then heading back to LA to record her new album. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Still to come here tonight, previews of this week's Nation to Nation and APTN Investigates. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And it's a double photo from Greg Scriver, who served as a keeper of the memorial cloth on the most recent National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Not only did he thoroughly enjoy the day, but he was also able to snap this photo of the APTN staff that were working on site. Thanks as always, Greg, for sharing. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, cloudy and 12 for Fredericton, 13 for Halifax, 5 in Kuujjuaq, cloudy and +3 in Nain, 12 for Montreal, showers and 6 for Val-d'Or. 15 in Sault Ste. Marie, rain, and 9 for North Bay. 13 in Kapuskasing, 17 in Thunder Bay. 8 with showers in God's Lake, smoky and 3 for Pucketwagon. Cloudy and 10 in Winnipeg, 7 with cloudy skies for Dauphin. 13 with the sun out in Regina, 10 in Saskatoon. 7 and cloudy for La Ronge and Buffalo Narrows. In northern Alberta, 10 in Peace River and Fort McMurray. 12 for Edmonton and Lethbridge, 9 in Medicine Hat. 10 in Vancouver, sun's out, and 12 for Kamloops. 8 with showers in Prince George, sunny and 8 in Smithers. -3 in Old Crow, 5 in Whitehorse. +2 in Yellowknife, 0 in Norman Wells. -11 for Sax Harbor, -2 in Pawlatuck, 4 in Chesterfield, Whale Cove, and Arviette, -7 in Resolute, 0 in Joe Haven. Time now to head over to our Ottawa studio where Karen Pugliese is standing by with a preview of tonight's episode of Nation to Nation.
Tonight we're talking about Jordan's Principle. If you've seen mental health programs shut down in your community, maybe your kids have lost a breakfast program or an educational support, well, you're not alone. Across the country, families are losing support that was once covered by Jordan's Principle. We'll explain why the government scaled back the program, what it means for kids who need help most, and if families who have lawyered up are going to change things for everyone. Child welfare advocate Cindy Blackstock will be here with me, and lawyer David Taylor join me along with the Minister of Indigenous Services, Mandy Golmasti. That's coming up in less than 5 minutes on Nation to Nation.
Big topic there. Thanks, Karen. APTN Investigates returns this week with a new chapter of Secrets of the Bay. Following a 2-year investigation, reporter Kenneth Jackson unraveled police theories surrounding the deaths of 2 Mohawk men in 2015. Now, with their manner of death changed from accidental to undetermined, the Toronto Police Homicide Unit has reopened the case, and Kenneth is back on the road searching for answers. Here's a preview.
The families have said the same name for years. A man on the other side of the border, someone they believe killed their sons. Many in the community believe it too, even if there's no evidence to prove it. And now I'm crossing into the United States to find him. The man hasn't been seen in Tyendinaga in more than 10 years. Not since the bodies of Matthew Fairman and Tyler Merica were pulled from the Bay of Quinte. He left immediately, back to his home in the Onondaga Nation outside of Syracuse, New York. That's where I'm going, to knock on his door and ask him, did you kill the boys? It's about 9 a.m. in early April. It's been just a month since we forced the coroner to change Tyler and Maddie's manner of death from accident to undetermined, after proving the police theory of how the boat sank was wrong. As a result, for the first time in 10 years, authorities are now considering homicide, and all the evidence is being re-examined. Still, right now I'm wondering if I made the right decision to come here. The only backup I have is my camera operator, filming from inside our car rental parked on the side of the road.
Looking forward to that. You can catch APTN Investigates Secrets of the Bay, Chapter 5, airing this Saturday on APTN. And Kenneth will be here to join us tomorrow night to talk about this latest chapter. It's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. You can stay up to date with the very latest by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. And Creason will have your first look at the day's news right here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Stick around. Karen is up next with Nation to Nation. Have a great night.